Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanoff. Now, one of my favorite musicals is Come From Away. I admit it. I love that show. And today's guest was there from the beginning through to its Tony and Olivier Award winning nights. He's been a theatrical producer for almost 20 years, was the producing artistic director of the Canadian Musical Theater Project at Sheridan College for over 10, and the co-founder of his latest endeavor, the company My Story Creative. And we're going to get into all of this stuff. I'm looking forward to talking about it. I'm excited to talk to him about all these things. I'd like to welcome to the show, Michael Rubinoff. Michael, hello.
Hello. You know what? Come From Away is my favorite musical too. It's okay. It's okay.
I love that show. Not just because you're sitting there, but I've seen it and couple of times. I do love it. So
no, you know what? It truly is a beautiful thing how that show has resonated around the world. I mean, it was extraordinary, just to go to Broadway to have a Canadian company, but as we're recording this, there's just a gorgeous production in the Netherlands that's going to open very soon. It's a non-replica production, so it's its own production in Dutch, and it just looks stunning. And I'm just continue to be in awe as these international productions. There's a Finnish production that will open in Finland in the new year, and there was a Argentinian production that was about to open in Buenos Aires just before the pandemic hit. That'll reopen later next year. So it's beautiful that a message of kindness, and humanity continues to resonate. And some people feel even more so after what we've been through in the last 19, 20 months.
Very true. Very true. Now, before we get into all of that stuff, I want to get to know you first. Our listeners might not know who you are. So who is Michael Rubinoff in 30 seconds? The 30-second bio of Michael.
So I say I am an igniter of creation and a supporter of storytellers. I like developing new musicals. I'm a producer, a creative producer, and a lot of artists and writers wear so many hats. I want to take one hat away and allow them to do what they do best, and that's write and create. So that's what I am, and it's musical theater. The majority of my time in terms of creating is in that genre.
And we thank you for it. So before we get in again, I want to take it back. Were you always into musicals growing up, or is that something you discovered a little bit later in life?
No, I always loved it. I say I was a child actor of no consequence. I did film and television. I never got cast in a musical. I always dreamed of it. But, I was one of those kids that, I loved the school musicals, loved the camp musicals, played a triumphant Tevye when I was probably 10 or 11 years old at Camp Walden, seminal production of Fiddler on the Roof. But it was really the thunderbolt for me was Les Miserables when I was 13, seeing that Canadian company at the Royal Alexandra Theatre. That was just the experience that I said, I want to be a part of this. I really want to be a part of creating this. I mean, I was so struck by the emotion, the talent, the creativity, and that just stayed with me. So I eventually decided that, producing was really where I wanted to situate myself, gave up on the, performing publicly. I will do many private performances in the car, or you see me driving. I've got the Broadway channel on, belting away. But it sort of felt, especially in Canada, where I'm based and my work is based. There was a shortage, and still is, of producers that create work, support work, develop work. So that was of interest to me.
Cool. So I've read your bio, so I know this.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
After high school, did you go into theater?
No, sir. As a Jewish kid from the suburbs of Toronto, I went off to do a political science degree, and then I went to law school. I know, right? Reeks of theater. I really thought, politics is my other passion. So I think that route was knocking at the door. But in law school, in my last year of law school, I produced and directed the university musical, which was Blood Brothers, which was a show I absolutely love and Fun fact, our production of Come From Away in London's West End is at the Phoenix Theatre, where Blood Brothers played, I think, for nearly 20 years in the West End. So, musical theater was always a part, was always a love, extracurricular. I was involved in it, even if I wasn't in a academic program. And, I did go off to be a lawyer and did practice law parallel to my producing career for many years. But I also felt, in those beginning years as a lawyer, I took a couple of years off to say, you know what, I want to try this producing thing. This was the time to do it, and pursued that, nearly 20 years ago now.
Yeah, let's be honest, politics and theater, not that far apart.
Not that far apart at all.
So once you decide to delve into the producing part, what was the first thing you started producing, and what was that experience like?
So I was trying to find, a niche in Toronto, which I would call mid-size commercial theater. So, Toronto, we've got obviously our biggest and most prominent commercial musical theater producer, Mirvish Productions. And then Canada is mostly not-for-profit theater. There wasn't something that was in between that sort of was bringing more off-Broadway fare or smaller musicals, in a for-profit model. So when I started early on, I did a non-equity production of Chorus Line down at the St. Lawrence Center for the Arts. That was the first, I started looking at musicals that you could reasonably do on a reasonable budget. I was directing at the time these shows. I thought, the cheapest director would be myself. The critics agreed, not in the most favorable way. But that's really how I started. Was, I had gone around the world meeting with producers to get advice. David Mirvish, Bill Kenwright, Cameron McIntosh. Meeting with these extraordinary commercial producers, and they sort of all said the same thing. The best way to learn this is to do it. You've just got to take that terrifying leap and run with it. And that's how I learned. I started developing. It's funny. I remember developing a new musical about a hip hop Passover Seder that was combining klezmer music and hip hop by Josh Dolgan, as DJ knows, so-called. I remember doing all those things at the beginning, and it was really exciting. But look, if I look back on what I was doing then compared to now, I'd be horrified.
Yeah.
But you had to learn, and that production of A Chorus Line did make a tiny bit of money. It did break even, and I started to see that there was an appetite from audiences to see this type of work. But then we got interrupted a couple of years later by something called SARS, the original. Which, just as I was sort of gaining momentum, I had done, Side by Side by Sondheim and Evita and Free to Be You and Me. And then I started to take the leap into equity, bringing an off-Broadway show called Game Show, which was a wonderful show where audience, there was a whole story, but audience members would come on stage and play a real game and win real prizes. But it was that summer, and that was the summer that followed SARS, where just things fell off. People were afraid to come to Toronto, and also our American friends, the passport requirements went in. You didn't need a passport to cross border. You could just show some ID. And, most Americans don't have passports. So that was a really, really tough summer.
No. Well, and it's never easy to jump into something, not knowing, but that's the great thing about it. You don't know what you don't know. And like you said, when you look back, you go, oh, what was I thinking? But
I think we're, I say this, like, we're so brave. We're a lot braver when we're younger and stupid. Like as much as maybe you're, I look at decisions, especially when you're trying to make art and you refine your decisions, but you're a lot more uninhibited, which is quite nice. I've always been a risk taker, and I like to produce things that scare me, but you're more willing to do things you wouldn't do now. Like, when I make decisions, take things on now, there's an infrastructure, there's a network, there's, but that didn't exist when you're starting out. You're just sort of, you're jumping in and having a run at it. And, when I look back, I mean, again, I could not, I feel so privileged and have had some success. None of it would have been possible without all these, what really were wonderful experiences, working with great people, I still connect with and work with today, years later, and people I've watched careers, really explode. But I got to do some things that, I really enjoyed that I knew other theater companies just would not take on.
What would be one of those shows? I'm curious. Or
I'll give you two examples. So one of the things I'm really proud of, there was a fringe show called Boy Groove that came out of from the West, and it was Aaron Macri, Chris Craddock had written it, and it was a satire, really, really satire and dark comedy on boy bands in the music industry at the time, sort of juxtaposing boy bands and Eminem, and it was a comedy, but it really had a great message. I mean, I thought, and that scared the hell out of me, because that was very, oh boy, there was a lot of heavy stuff in that, and a lot of heavy language. And, we got phenomenal reviews and tons of Dora nominations. I think it was the first show to win the Dora Audience Choice Award, the very first one. And I was very happy about that, but nobody else was going to pick that show up from the Fringe and do a commercial run at the Diesel Playhouse. The other show I'm really proud of was Dog Sees God: Confessions of a Teenage Blockhead, doing the professional Canadian premiere of that show. Again, that was Boy Groove was a musical. Dog Sees God was a play, but that was a really important play in terms of what it had to say about young people and self-identification and sexual identity. And that show, when I look at the cast, it was a very young cast. I mean, that was done in New York with a starry cast, and I sort of took a view here in Toronto. But we had Paula Brancati, who got a Dora nomination for her role in that. Jake Epstein was in that. Ben Lewis, and a very young and astonishingly talented Tatiana Maslany. I mean, that was just a really special group. Adamo Ruggiero, Mike LaBelle, Siobhan, I'm forgetting her last name now, but that was an incredible group of people. And I thought that show had a really great message, especially, I was trying to do things too that would attract young people, that young people would come and, experience theater, or a type of theater they wouldn't really see anywhere else.
That's fantastic, you giving these opportunities. Now, I just want to do, as a side note and a selfish note, I love that you're talking about all the things I know, like the theaters and the people and the shows. Usually when I talk to people from New York or England, they're mentioning theaters, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've not been to that one. No, I've been to that. Yeah, I've been to
I just want to give credit where credit's due, because it was I want to also say it was Siobhan Murphy. That's what I thought. I don't know why I didn't let that. And Alex Saslov and Lindsay Clark. I want to mention the company because I mentioned them all, and they were that was just so special, that experience. Yeah.
Again, that's another side note. Did you find a lot of difference for anybody who's listening, for producers who want to get into this? You said you did commercial, you've done non-commercial, you've done the Fringe. What advice would you say to these people? Is it essentially the same for all three of those, or is it slightly different? And what pitfalls?
Yeah, I mean, I've always done it commercially. When I say the Fringe, I sort of plucked the show out of the Fringe, the commercial run. So I think all the mechanics are the same in this, except where you get your money. So if it's commercially, you're getting it from investors, and you have responsibility to try and return that money back to your investors. If it's not for profit, you're usually writing grants or getting donations. But from a producing perspective, you got to make good decisions and hire a great creative team, right? That's most of the battle, like a great director, and your casting, and your director works to bring on the rest of the team, and obviously the cast. And so you want to hire good people. That's number one. And you want to hire good people because let them do the artistic work. I give notes, obviously get involved. I don't sit in rehearsals, but we'll go to run throughs, etc. then you got to sell your show, and whether it's not for profit or commercial, you have to sell your show. And I feel as a producer, until every seat is full, your job is never done. So what does that mean to sell your show? That's whether you're dealing with groups, you're dealing with marketing, advertising, communications, theater critics, all the rest of it. There's just unlimited work until you get every seat sold.
I do not envy the producing position.
Listen, it's a challenge. It's lonely, but it is rewarding. I think when you get to see a team, that's one of the things. That's why I said, I sort of said in my introduction, like, especially in Canada, and it's not unique to Canada, but it's actor, director, star, set painter, launderer, it dresser, it's all those titles. And what I've tried to do is let the director just direct. Let the writer just write. Let the designers just design, so that they can do their best work. Because if you're pulled in so many different directions, it's very hard. It's just, but if you can focus all of that creative energy in one place. So that's what, I think makes me happy, is just stand, at the back of a theater and, see these, beautiful things come to life.
That's fantastic. So let's move forward a little bit to 2011, I think.
Yes.
Around there. When you joined Sheridan, and let's talk about the Canadian Music Theatre Project and
Sure.
what it is exactly, because some people might not know. And all the group, over 25, I think, shows or something like that. A lot of them that you've held workshops. So please tell us a little bit about that.
So, I had an association with Sheridan as a producer, obviously had cast a number of alumni and had done some lecturing there, and an opportunity had arisen. I was, I had two full-time gigs as a lawyer and a producer. At that time, I was back, at the quote unquote Bay Street law firm, earning my keep so that I could help put on these productions. And Sheridan came knocking on the door about this job at the time as the Associate Dean of Visual and Performing Arts. And for those that aren't familiar, Sheridan has one of the leading music theater programs in the country. And I was very interested in the job. I wasn't sure what it did, but I was very interested as a non-academic. I was very interested in the job for the perspective that in Ontario, the province of Ontario, this was a 3-year advanced diploma program that was transitioning to a 4-year degree program. And that was very interesting to me to lead that transition as an administrator. And as part of that, in the 4th year of the program, they needed a capstone project, a project that would apply all of their skills learned in the previous 3 years to something. And that's where, the Canadian Music Theatre Project sprung up. This was an opportunity to do two things. It would fill an academic need, that students would spend 5 intense weeks working on a new musical. So they couldn't go to YouTube, they couldn't listen to a cast recording. They would have to rely on those skills to make choices, to inhabit. Many of the shows we did, they were inhabiting these characters and creating these characters for the very first time. The second need we were fulfilling was a cultural need, because in Canada, it was very hard. There's organizations that had done some musical development over the years, but they always fell apart because of funding. Here we could institutionalize this because it would be part of the academic need and fulfill that cultural need, where we could pay writers to say, hey, come hang out for 5 weeks. We'll bring on a professional director and music director. The students are just wildly talented and smart and creative, and let's see what happens. And that was really how it started. And of course, a musical I had tried to get written and done for many years was what became Come From Away. And as this transition to Sheridan was happening a few months before, I had seen, or in 20, I think it was 2010, it was 2010, the summer of 2010 or the spring of 2010, I saw My Mother's Lesbian Jewish Wiccan Wedding, which was a musical by David Hein and Irene Sankoff, autobiographical about David and his mom. And I did not know David and Irene. I love the musical, and I said, we got to go out for dinner. We got to know each other, and we hit it off. And after 3 hours, I said, hey, I've been trying to find people to write this musical about the events in Gander, Newfoundland on 9/11. A number of writers had turned me down. They thought it was a tasteless idea, a terrible idea. I mean, they didn't understand that this was about the outpouring of humanity. I was very moved by this. And as I remind people in Canada, this was part of the story that was reported in those days and years following about these 38 planes landing when US airspace was closed. So when Sheridan was coming on my radar screen, I knew I wanted to do this. I said to David and Irene, I will commit to like the first show it really was the first show we will develop is what became, it had various different names, but when we did the first workshop, it was eventually had Come From Away, but the first show I committed to through this incubator was Come From Away.
That's fantastic. Now you've seen this show go from nothing to everything. That must be an incredible experience.
It's wild because I'm a theater fan. I'm a theater kid. I get excited walking by theater, and I feel when I lose that, I'll go back to practicing law full time. And with Come From Away, I'm still in disbelief. Because when when you're in New York and you're walking by the theater and you see all these kids lining up for Rush tickets. I did that. Rent, I was in that Rent line in Toronto for the Canadian company many times over. And, it was a dream of mine, certainly, to launch a show to Broadway and to be part of that community. And, really as a Canadian, I think that was also important to me too, that we, have world-class talent, we have important stories to tell and want to share that with the world. So I am just as enthusiastic and excited about, musical theater as I was when I was a kid, and to be a small part of it, and have this show, Come From Away's over 1,300 performances. I think recently we became the 75th or 74th longest running show in Broadway history. So it is really, it will take years to process, but it is joyous knowing, especially when I speak to young people, knowing that Come From Away can have an impact on a young person as Les Miserables or Rent or Blood Brothers had on me. It just continues that chain. So I can't wait to see the young Canadian producer that trailblazes, another big international hit, because they were inspired by Come From Away.
Very nice. So what are some of the other shows that have, you started with Come From Away, and we know where that went.
Yeah, that was pretty
hard to top that.
Yeah. It's true. But we did close to 30 shows there over a decade of my tenure, over a decade. And another of the shows, we have had a wonderful collaboration with Neil Bartram and Brian Hill, who wrote Story of My Life. I just adore them. And one of the early shows that we worked on with them was The Theory of Relativity. And the Theory of Relativity, the idea was to create something that community theater groups, high schools, universities could do. And they set out and created a song and text cycle about young people, leaving high school or college and exploring the rest of their lives. So we developed Theory of Relativity. That has become an international sensation. Last year, the Theater Education Association, I don't know if I have that name right, but they named it the third most produced musical by American high schools.
Wow.
In the US. It was one of the most licensed shows by Music Theater International, one of the leading licensing companies. It got a professional premiere at the Goodspeed Opera House. It got a cast recording from PS Classics that has people like Erica Henningsen on it, Giselle Jimenez, who's just, killing it in Tick, Tick, Boom, if you get a chance to see that movie. It's just such an incredible group of people on that cast recording that are all doing Broadway, off-Broadway film, television. They're amazing. And that show has had productions all over the world. It is, I know Neil and Brian and I got to see it in London, but there's been productions in Australia. There was a foreign language production, I believe, in Vienna. And that show just keeps on giving. I'm going to see an online production done by a youth company in the Barbados in a couple of weeks. And so that show, was huge. the other shows that followed, and this is what I think, I was most excited about Come From Away, that, Come From Away, was the fifth Canadian musical to get to Broadway. I define a Canadian musical as a musical written by Canadians. It's obviously become the longest running Canadian musical, but it blazed a trail. In Canada, our regional theaters were hesitant to do Canadian musicals. They wanted to do the tried and true American and British shows that could be the big money makers. But that shifted. And you look at shows, it was originally called Prom Queen. It changed titles to Louder We Get, which was performed at the Segal Center and the High School Project, the Grand Theater, and just before shutdown at Theatre Calgary. That was also part of the National Alliance for Musical Theaters Festival of New Musicals in New York, where Come From Away was also part of and picked up its commercial producers. So we have that show. We've got a show called Grow that I'm, a lead producer on, that we were just about to go into rehearsal at the Grand Theater. That is written by, book by Matt Murray, music by Colleen Dauncey, and lyrics by Akiva Romer Siegel. So that show is going to open at the end of March or 2022. So we're going to go back into rehearsals in the new year. A show called, we change titles all the time. I don't know why, but My Bonnie Lass, which has now been changed to Maggie, wonderful show about a working class mother in Scotland post-war, written by, the Canadian legendary recording artist Johnny Reid with Matt Murray and Bob Foster. That we're going to announce some really exciting things in the new year about its regional track. The sad thing was 21, 22, I think I had counted, there were 6 or 7 CMTP developed musicals that had been announced and that got squashed, that we hope will come back. Kelly versus Kelly, Britta Johnson, Sarah Farb's musical. So there were all these things that were happening with these shows, and then it was kind of like, But I would say more than half had received professional productions, whether in the United States or in Canada. So it was just thrilling that this energy and this interest from Pump Up the Volume, which was done by an American team, was all set to go at the Citadel Theater. So hopefully that will come back on. So there were all these announcements that were out there of the shows, and yeah.
Yeah, I saw. I saw Grow. I saw Pump Up the Volume, and I've completely forgotten the third one. The one
Maggie, My Bonnie Lass.
No, the one with the furniture.
Hoarding.
Yeah, I saw that one, and I had tickets in Pittsburgh to go see Pump Up the Volume. I was planning to go down to London to see Grow, and then the pandemic hit, and all my plans.
Pandemic all fell apart. Hoarding, wonderful British team. They just a few weeks ago, I was in London, England, and the National Theatre just did a workshop of Hoarding, and we hope they're going to continue. So the reach of the Canadian Music Theatre Project, which was, its ethos was to support Canadian and international book writers, lyricists, and composers. The majority of the work was done by Canadian teams, but we also invited several American teams, and we collaborated, I should say, with Australians, Matthew Lee Robinson on a show called Atlantis. We worked with Neil and Brian and Nick Yu from China, who's one of China's most prominent playwrights, on a project called Bethune. So there's just such an incredible energy, and that's a credit to the teams and the students that really gave their heart and soul and had this just really wonderful experience in creating these roles and changing the face. I used to say, we're not just recreating musical theater. You usually do shows, which that existed, but students also got the chance not just to recreate, but actually create. So very exciting.
Yeah. I went to Sheridan back in the day, so I'm a graduate of there, so I know the incredible experience they would get, especially with this thing, being part of something new and helping create something and foster it and bring to life this thing, and be like, I was there when it first started.
Well, slowly, it hasn't lined up perfectly, but a number of the students that either worked on the shows or worked on Canadian Music Theatre Project shows are cast, in these productions. So
Yeah.
that's sort of super fun to see that those students are making their way into these shows all across the country.
Well, again, thank you for starting that and bringing to life those almost 30 shows and giving them the opportunity to you know, try stuff and experiment, because we know when it's expensive and it's not easy to just even put on these workshops and get these people, and you've given the opportunity to let these things grow and flourish. That was terrible, but
No, it's good. It's good. But you know what? But what you're saying, which is really important to me and something I talk about with the teams, it's the opportunity to fail safely. You know, musical theater is about rewriting, and you need a safe place to fail. And that was what was exciting, that, you know, because of the level of the skill of students, they could bring in a song and hear it, teach it, you know, quickly, hear it on the spot and be like, this is a hit, or this isn't working. Or they could hear a scene and be like, yeah, this is more. And they could come in the next day. And I often find, you know, everybody's got to work towards a deadline, especially musical theater folks, that, you know, some of the best work would happen, you know, in those like critical moments and last minute moments as the process was coming to an end. Those epiphanies would happen, and you'd get this great song or great scene or breakthrough in an act, you know. And that's what it was. I mean, that was the vibrancy of what the room was like. And, you know, when I get to go and see all these shows, you know, I think of those students. Like, I think of that development process. I think of, you know, especially, you know, Come From Away, which I've gotten to see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. I still think about, you know, the students and how a moment was created, or why something is in the show, or why something lands in that way. Yeah. You know, it's really special.
Again, thank you so much for that. So now let's move on to your next endeavor. About 6, 7, 8 months ago, you started a new company called My Story Creative. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So after a decade at Sheridan, I think it was time. And, you know, I wanted to focus fully on my producing and creative development. So I sort of have 2 tracks in life now. One is, you know, very much producing, very much, you know, excited in the next couple of months to announce some, you know, marquee projects in addition to Maggie and Grow. But that's going to be very robust. And then it was, you know, another track in terms of this, you know, consulting world, but working with somebody I greatly admire, Dr. Yael Katz, who is an academic whose expertise is in creativity, the study of creativity. So we're combining our efforts to work with different organizations and companies to help them leverage stories to achieve strategic goals. So what does that mean? So, you know, there are lots of things that people want to accomplish, and there are different ways that they can try to accomplish it. Some of it's very institutionalized, but how do you accomplish something? So whether it's an information campaign or a project or a social innovation idea, how do you do that and make it stick? So this is the question that we explore in this endeavor. So how do we work with companies to look at their stories and lift those stories into narratives, immersive experiences that their communities build, but that the public will also remember? So it really is theater. It really is, in a sense, you know, taking these compelling ideas and delivering them in a more compelling way. So it's a very different approach to traditionally when you may bring in consultants or people to work with, and you may have certain deliverables in that. What we do is we produce something that is public, that is memorable, and that emotionally connects with an audience, which is really, you know, me relying on, you know, my theater expertise, and Yael looking at this from an academic critical lens through the study of creativity. And also social innovation is very much a part of that. So we look for, you know, when you work with private companies, we can't scream yet what that is, but what I am very excited to share is that I think it will engage the public in a way that will get the attention we hope, but will also be driven by social innovation, that we will look at certain social ills that need more attention to be resolved and solved, and in certain areas. And I'm being cagey because I can't talk openly, but it's another outlet of creative expression. So I feel and it's such an interesting time to shift gears. You know, we are slowly coming on the other side of a moment that has affected everybody in the world, and certainly affected us most or very hard in the arts and creativity world, where, you know, yes, there's been a lot of great online work. I got tired of it, to be honest. It just became difficult to, you know, receive our medium online in and out. But I think that the way, you know, we're not going back to normal. It's not happening. You know, there has been you know, a reckoning with regards to institutional racism, and there's been a reckoning in terms of what the perceived norms of are in our theater industry, and that has to change. And I think change is exciting. I think change is important, and I think if you're going to continue to fuel the survival of the theater, you do need to pay more attention to being a more inclusive industry, because a more inclusive industry is going to raise more inclusive stories. And though it's those stories that add to the richness and will attract new audiences and will allow people to experience theater in a different way, equally compelling, if not more. So I'm excited about where we are in this moment and the opportunities, the positive opportunities to move forward in it.
I love the through line through your career of producing and just the support and helping of new works, and you know, from your early producing days with the Fringe and those shows to Sheridan to this. Do you know why this is something that you do? Is there something in your life or impetus for this sort of thing?
You know,
it's who you are.
It's interesting. You know what? It's interesting. Let me give you a theater analogy, but I want to be serious about it. When I'm thinking about a show or developing something, it has to affect an audience. And in order for it to affect an audience emotionally, it has to affect me emotionally. And it has to continue to affect me emotionally throughout a process. So when I'm asking a writer to give me a new draft of a script, when I'm reading that script or listening to the demos, if I'm not feeling anything, it's not working. If I'm feeling something on the 58th draft, or, you know, like every time I go to Come From Away, you know, there are moments that I still get emotional. You know, it's going to work for an audience. Okay, where does that come from? I said to you, you know, at the outset that, you know, the thunderbolt that struck me was Les Miserables. But there's a moment in that show that I think has guided me. And I'm not a religious person. You know, I mentioned I'm of the Jewish faith, and that's important to me and culturally. And, you know, I'm not the most religious person. However, when the bishop gives Valjean the candlesticks, in that moment of redemption, in that moment of second chances, in that moment of one person believing in you, and that can change the world, that has always been a compelling guidepost to me in the work that I want to do. And I think eventually, as you progress in your career, you can't do everything you want to do, but you know that you can lift people up in the sense that, you know, I don't have the discipline or the courage to be a writer. I always admire writers, because at some point in this terrible process, you have to share your work publicly before you're ready to do so, whether that's in a workshop, public or private, or in a preview, or in a out-of-town tryout. You've got to share your work. So I want to be the most supportive and respectful to get people, you know, down the road on their journeys. But I do want to be protective, and I do want them to know that they do have somebody that is looking out for them, that's supporting them, and that's wanting them to succeed and providing that opportunity. And it inspires me. I mean, I am just in awe of what people can create, because, you know, I will work on things and have the stories and, you know, ideas, and we'll write a creative brief, but it's putting into words and music that I think these extraordinary people do that is sacred to me. So I don't know. I think there's just something in that moment from Les Mis about how you can, treat others with kindness and support. And if you're in a position to lift somebody up, that you should try and do that.
Well, from all of us out here, thank you so much for all your support, not only for the Canadian musical theater world, but just the theater world in general. And we need people like yourself who can take risks and are willing to help new creators and bring forth these works, because they all need to be heard at some point. So thank you, Michael.
No, I feel very lucky, and I've just been able to work with a lot of great people and been given opportunities myself that I know I'm very privileged to have. And the theater industry is built on mentorship and support, and I just find that no matter where you sit on that pecking order, I just everybody, I've always found just such wonderful support from theater practitioners and producers all around the world that we're so small. Like when you compare to film and television, we are tiny. Yeah. And I truly do believe that someone else's success is an encouragement for your own success. I really think that's important, that we work together to lift up writers and actors and voices, and just support and create. So yeah, and it's a lot of fun.
And that's the key. You got to have fun with what you do. If you don't, why are you doing it, right? So thank you, Michael, for coming on and talking to us today. But before we go, I always ask 3 questions of my guests. There's no right or wrong answers, but we get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
The real deep Michael Rubinoff.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, no, not that bad. But question number 1. What creator or team within musical theater has had a great influence on you? It could be a composer, lyricist, director, producer, actor, stage manager, even. It can be somebody famous, not famous, like a teacher. Is there somebody who's had a great influence on you?
Yeah, Harold Prince, I look at, the collaborations that Harold Prince had certainly early on in his career, West Side Story, Fiddler on the Roof, which is such a show that I love. And he was a guy that, stage manager, director, producer, took those risks, supported artists right until his last breath. So he's just somebody I truly admired and did get the opportunity to meet which was very special, to get a little bit of guidance and advice and have that interaction.
Very nice. Correct answer. So question number 2. Now, the EGOT is one of the most difficult and exclusive clubs to be a part of, right? I think there's only like 16 winners of this and be a part of it. But I believe that you, and I might be wrong, and you can let me know, you are a part of a more exclusive club. You're part of the DOT, which is the Dora, the Olivier, and the Tony. Now,
okay.
Can you think of anybody else part of the DOT?
Anybody else who's part of the DOT? Okay, I have a Tony nomination. Well,
Comfortably won something, didn't it?
Yes, Chris Ashley won Best Director, but as producers got the Tony nomination. But no. We'll get that Tony. It'll be Grow or Mac. So don't worry. We can rewatch this and say you were right. Who else has? Oh boy, who else has the Olivier? I think I'd have to say producer here. I'd have to say Garth. I think Garth may have the DOT. I can't think, David Mervish for sure. Mm-hmm. David Mervish 100%. I know has the DOT, but I'm trying to think of like actors or directors. Brent Carver, I don't believe won the Olivier. He for sure has a Dora, and he obviously has a Tony Award. Yeah, but I love that. I love that question. I'll have to do some research on the DOT, but I love that.
I was thinking about there's going to be very few people, and you are part of an exclusive club, I do believe. So
thank you. So, and I have to say David and Irene.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
have a couple Tony nominations for book and score, and they do have an Olivier, and they do have a Dora.
So, there we go. Not really a question, but I just want.
No, that's fine.
So correct answer, 1 point for that. So final question, and might be the most important, and will reveal more about you than anything else.
Yeah.
Food in the theater or cell phone in the theater, which is worse?
Oh my God, this is the hardest. Okay, I think this is the hardest question I've ever been asked. I am okay. Which is worse? Okay, I'm gonna say food, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because I always joke, it's the buffet. Like when you get people around you that bring the buffet,
Yeah.
that could last the entire show. Like the unwrapping, the eating, the throwing away, the opening, the fizzy, whatever it is, closing it, the talking over what they're grabbing in the dark.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say food, because at least this, as much as the cell phone, you should absolutely go to hell if your cell phone brings, 100%. But at least the cell phone, for the most part, usually gets turned off. I know it's the people that have it deep in their purse and it takes forever, but usually we can trust, once we hear the cell phone, we're going to be done for the most part, not always. But the buffet could go on forever. So I'm going to say food is worse.
Do you have a story about the worst thing you've food wise that you've dealt with?
It's just, I think sometimes when the shows run very long in New York and you're more of a touristy crowd, it's the talking with the food that makes you I say there's two types. There's a couple of people that'll disturb your theater going. There's the buffet. Then there's the joke repeaters. The joke repeaters also drive me nuts. That when the actors are doing such hard work, they drop the joke and one person says, "What?" And then somebody has to like explain the joke, or just when someone does the joke and somebody feels they just have to repeat the joke for no reason at all. So between the cell phones, the buffet, and the joke repeaters, that can make me nuts. But I'm trying to think if I've had really bad experiences. I mean, I haven't had too terrible experiences. Oh, you know what? I did. Okay, I will tell you the worst. No, this is probably the worst crowd experience. I saw the revival of Dreamgirls in the West End, and I wish I could recall the name of the actress. She was wonderful. She's singing "I Am Telling You," and she's just getting to the climactic moment in that glorious song, and these women in front of me start having a conversation, like literally in the minute, like in that space between the big note, being like, "When's the intermission? Do you think it's almost intermission?" And that was like, yeah, that was tough. That was really tough. I did say something to them. I did. Yeah. But I had to be careful because we were going to spend the second act together. But I thought, oh my gosh, this is when you decide to, that really bothered me. Yeah.
I would have also accepted both are awful, but you got the correct answer anyways. 3 for 3. Congratulations. No prizes, but we get to know you a little bit.
There you go.
So Michael, thank you again for coming on and everything you're doing, you've done for the musical theater industry in the world, and especially in Canada and Toronto, because we need more producers like yourself, because if we don't have producers, we don't have shows. Yeah. So thank you for everything.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for doing this and giving the world an insight into what we do. I really appreciate it.
No problem. We were just speaking with Michael Rubinoff, producer extraordinaire, because I don't know what else to call him. Tune in next week as we'll be speaking with another guest or guests about their life, love, and passion that is musical theater. I'm your host, Jean-Paul Jovanoff, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.